the collector's choice event that you're doing, when I saw that event, at the time that right before I saw your event on the call for entry, I was thinking about how to give my work away to help me detach from it. And then at the same time, your event came up, and I just thought, what a beautiful way to benefit your gallery and people, that collectors, and just everybody in the art world, and how much it benefited me to detach from, because the work that I gave the wildlife expedition, it was the most, there was no work that I was more attached to than that piece. So, you know, there was kind of like a surrender of, I'm going to surrender this because I could see it's an attachment for me, and I want to, you know, continue my practice. I want to stay committed to what my vows are. So that was a little bit of the process. His name is Ethan. He's my cousin. He's someone, his life has been very difficult for a 7-year-old boy. He came in premature. He was deaf. He couldn't learn to talk. He had a very difficult time. He almost died quite a few times after he was born. And so he was also someone for me that was a model of, you know, having incredible, you know, difficulties early on in life and overcoming those difficulties. And he's an incredibly joyful person. So I had a relationship with him early on, as early as he started learning to talk, you know, and kind of maneuver and get past his physical disabilities. He's now has perfect hearing and has, you know, still has speech therapy, but he's talking very well. So there was that connection, and I developed a relationship with him that I started painting and drawing him when he was 3, and that's continued through the years. The model for that is Jessica Tedder. And she lives here in Cruston, and I met her when I first started painting, actually. And when I met her, she was homeless. She had 2 children. She was pregnant and living in her van, living in her van in Cruston. I invited her to come here to the monastery and to be here if she wanted, anytime she wanted. I just gave her an open invitation. And we do that. I mean, if I see somebody that needs a meal, needs support, I invite them to come. And they can come for free if they're going through a difficult time and they need a refuge, and we serve. If you're here in our center, there's nothing you have to do. We serve meals, we take care of everything. So for someone to come here and get out of their crazy world for a few days could really transform their life. And so we offered that to Jessica, and I was fascinated by her. She was one of the most fascinating people I'd ever met. She was a dedicated mother, yet she was homeless. And we just there was a connection between us, and we became friends. And I just asked her, I'd love to paint you. How would you feel about that? And she was completely open to it, and has been ever since. So I started drawing and painting her and getting to know her. And she's a friend now. She now has 4 children, actually. And I did photo shoots with her and did drawings of her during both her recent pregnancies. And she's such a great model, because I think as an artist, you're always looking for a model that has some kind of transparency. You know, the way you're looking at them and the way they are in front of you is the way they are all the time. They're not guarded. They're not consistent. She's just completely, everything is on the surface with her. And she has a very difficult life. So for that to be true for her was completely amazing for me. And she was a model for me on many levels in many ways. So she's a wonderful subject to work with. She's also very beautiful. I've also photographed her children. In fact, this painting behind me that I'm working on now, There's No Planet B, that's her son, Sage. And so she has been the subject of many paintings. And with 4 Jennies, I had done a photo session with her, and then I had done a painting, then I photographed the painting, then it went through all these kind of mechanisms. And at one point I was playing with the values of it, and the expression of her face changed so much just because of the value change. Her expression, you know, it was the same perspective, it was the same everything except color. And it was also during the time of the kind of Black Lives Matter and all the, things that were happening in the news around racial inequality. And I just thought it was fascinating, particularly the blue kind of purple image of her, which looked so different than the rest of the images. She looked like almost a different person to me. And so I did that because I really was exploring, color, actually. What does color mean? How important is it? How meaningful? What is our interpretation of it? So that's how kind of For Jenny's came about. And then Bloom, in her last, was Jessica's third child. It was a week before she delivered her daughter Sophia, and she and I did a photo shoot together. And she wanted to be naked except for a sheet and be outside. So that's how we did the photo session. And it was a time for her of it was a very emotional time for her. She was, just starting to find a way not to be homeless. And she had this child coming that she had to be thinking about, like, okay, now I have a third child and I need to take care of this child. And she could barely take care of herself. And I kind of feel like she was looking to God for answers. Like, how do I do this? And so I felt there was also an enormous joy in her at the same time, this kind of blooming of, life in her that was coming out. And I expressed that with colored paint. And that's kind of how that image, again, that image was something I took photographs of, then painted, then took photographs of the painting, and it kept going like that, layer upon layer, for a while. I started drawing at a very early age. I'd say around maybe 5 or 6 years old. My father actually was an artist, and a lot of his family was interested in the arts, whether musicians or all kinds of different artistic abilities. So he kind of noticed I was actually drawing from life instead of just, drawing stick figures type of thing. And he took a very big interest in that. And he actually started training me to actually draw. He taught me perspective. And I was really young, but I was very interested in it. I was very, from an early age, I remember being very fascinated that you can draw something and it will look like whatever it is you're viewing outside. So it started there. And then I kept on drawing and I maybe painted a little bit in high school, but not really. I went to New Jersey State College of New Jersey, for my undergraduate, which was in art and actually advertising. And then I went on to get other degrees. I liked being an academic. I got a computer science degree, and I got a master's degree at NYU, which was a Galveston independent study, and there was a lot of art in it, art theory as well as painting. But it really didn't go too far in the painting world at that time. I came out of NYU. I worked in New York City for a little bit, and I found I was very kind of dissatisfied with my life, I would say. And I wanted to explore something that was going to give me answers to kind of what I'd call the big questions in life. And I got to the point where I was either going to find a spiritual connection that gave me some kind of purpose, or I didn't really have an interest in anything. And at that point, I left everything. I left my life, my job, my family, and I became a monastic for 22 years. And I lived in monasteries. Monastic life could be cloistered. I was not, but I did spend a lot of time in private retreat. And then in 2016, I moved to Crestone, Colorado, in the Vajravidya Tibetan Buddhist monastery here. And I'm still here. I'm now an ordained Tibetan Buddhist nun. And I started painting again in 2016 as a result of a very kind of deep transformation that I went through personally, and kind of reinitiated a creative spark in me, and that fascination with looking at the world and trying to capture that expression that you feel when you see the world in a painting or a mixed media and some type of art form. I think my inclination for spiritual life started really at an early age, at the same time actually as my interest in drawing and painting. And on a deeper level, I feel like my connection to art and my wanting to create was always immersed in that kind of seeking a connection to something that was kind of beyond, the separate self. For myself, I could only take that so far in art. I was able to kind of, a lot of people talk about having, some creative force come through them in the creation of their artwork, and I certainly feel that too. But I was seeking kind of a much more obvious and transparent connection to spirit than art was able to provide me. So I was only able to go so far in creating art as a way to connect with something higher. And I would, for whatever reason, wasn't able to get past that in my art work and in my art career. And so to me, I made the decision, I'd rather find out about what I'm doing here and where I'm going and, what is my purpose, than create art, because I felt like my art had no real message unless I had the answers to these questions. So it was actually two separate tracks for quite, a while. And then in 2016, it seemed to come together into one. As Buddhist monastics, we're doing every day, we're doing prayer, service, meditation, and some type of chant or singing to, in terms of glorifying the divine. In Catholic nuns and priests, and I have a lot of friends that are actually Catholic nuns and priests, and we compare and we find that we're actually doing pretty much the same thing. We're also a retreat center, and so we try to provide an environment for people that know nothing about Tibetan Buddhism, but can come to our center and experience kind of getting unplugged from the world. And I would say that is one of the biggest things we have to offer as a monastic environment, but also in the Buddhist tradition, is very much centered around what Buddhists call the Four Noble Truths, which is kind of a realization about the suffering in the world, then the realization that you can leave this suffering. There's ways to leave this suffering. And then the realization that there's actually a path to get out of the suffering of the world, which he taught through Buddhism. We're actually kind of a satellite center of the larger, there's 5 lineages somewhat in Tibetan Buddhism, and we're the Kaju lineage. So the head of our lineage is Trungpa Rinpoche. He's seated in Nepal. And our monastery is the American seat for Trungpa Rinpoche. So a lot of the monks, there's hundreds and hundreds of monks and nuns in Nepal and India that are part of this lineage. But here in the USA, we have a smaller center. We have 4 to 6 monks and nuns here during any one given time. And then Trungpa normally visits about once a year. And then we'll have about 20 to 30 monks and nuns that are here for a few months. We have 35 acres. Crestone, a lot of times you'll see, monasteries, monastic environments are built on mountainous areas, and ours is too. We're kind of on the Sangre de Cristo. We're 8,000 feet above sea level in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. And the reason for that is because it's actually easier to meditate and practice when you're kind of up in elevation somewhat. It's quieter, it's more peaceful, the air is cleaner. And so that's our environment, and we spend a lot of time mindfulness walking, doing hikes. We have a very large shrine, and we do practice inside. And actually, as a committed monk or nun, you would be, theoretically practicing all the time. You would always be on some level thinking about other people, thinking about serving other people, and keeping your connection to spirit. Most people that are monks and nuns, when they live in a monastery, they have what's called a cell. And the cell is usually about 8 feet by 11 feet. And then there's a shared bathroom. I happen to be the director of this monastery, so I'm actually running the monastery. So I have a little bit of a bigger space. I have a bedroom, and you can see part of this room. I have another room which I've turned into a studio. So my studio is maybe, I don't know, 12 by 14 feet, which would be, small for a lot of artist studios, but huge compared to what, most monks and nuns have. Yeah, so I'm very lucky in that way. I think I'm like, all other artists in that respect, where you'll feel inspired by something that touches your heart or moves you through what you're seeing in the world, through the news, through seeing other art. And you're just so taken with that, you might have like an incubation period where you're all of a sudden starting to see images and visions of something that you think you would like to express. And that's how definitely it works for me. I was on more of a private retreat last year for quite some time. And out of that private retreat, one of the things I was looking at was death, because that's a very big part of Buddhist practice, is to, acknowledge the fact that you are mortal and your body is going to die, but what doesn't die? And you start examining and exploring that. And so that became a subject of kind of my series called Portraits from the Bardo, which is, in Buddhist view, after you leave your body, you're going to go through these Bardo stages. And what happens in those Bardo stages is a kind of an accumulation and a result of your karmic actions and decisions through your life, and your good karma and your bad karma. And to kind of explore that while you're living makes your transition much easier, much more glorious. So I was kind of trying to explore that also in my paintings. And I'm very drawn to portraits, because I think that looking at other people, it's easy. People, I think, tend to be transparent. You could kind of see their soul when you look at them. And I'm always trying to explore that in other people. I've only really been painting now 4 years. But in this last year, I feel more passionate about having an expression, about wanting to share this expression. And maybe my expression can help other people, and which came from people coming to me and saying, I saw this painting that you did, and here's my interpretation of it, and can you talk to me about it? And it seemed to be that people were benefiting, were having an interaction with the painting. And I felt that that was important, and maybe that serves humanity in some way. So now I'm thinking more about doing a series. Actually, I'm working on that right now. There's a painting behind me. It's called There Is No Planet B, and it's kind of my expression and my feelings about where we are and where we're going forward to, the direction we're going as a planet. And, of course, it involves all the things that we have to address as a planetary humanity, which is climate change and, the destruction of nature. And so I'm really kind of wanting to put a message out there to help raise awareness about the fact that, what my personal feeling is about the planet, my connection to the planet, which is also very my connection to spirit, because I think that's very almost one. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's something worthwhile to pursue as a visual as a visual series of paintings or mixed media portraits. I would say through competition. I really value competition. I think there's so much to be gained as an artist from being in competition. And it also serves to help me practice, because in competition, there's that aspect of wanting to do well in competition. But as a monk or a nun, you want others to do well. Yeah. So you have the opportunity to rejoice for others when you don't do as well, or you're not singled out. You have then an opportunity to congratulate those who did well. And I find that's an extremely good practice for me, so that I could kind of monitor my attachment to being a recognized artist, which is a difficulty for me in some ways. For me, it is a constant practice. It's something that I feel deeply about because I have a deep love for humanity. But it didn't start out that way. I mean, I started out on my path as an incredibly self-absorbed, selfish person. And then there was a certain point where there was a shift in my thinking of, okay, you know what, maybe this life isn't really about me. Maybe it's about other people. And at that shift where I started turning my attention from always thinking about myself and my pursuits, and I want this and I don't want that, and let me go after this, when it changed from that to seeing, other people and feeling compassion for whatever they were going through, I started caring more about them and less about myself. And I think that's a very common shift for people for everybody, really. I think it will happen to everybody, or it does happen to everybody, where, children and parents are a perfect example. Someone has a child and all of a sudden their focus is on caring for that child. And so monastics, maybe in a broader sense, it's not uncommon to hear a Buddhist monk or nun say that they view everybody in the world as either their mother or their child, with that level of care for other people. And that's really, what you're trying to develop so that you can help, so your life can be of some help and benefit here. I think that's a very important aspect of, if you decide to be a monastic, it's a very big part of that. Are you wanting that for yourself? And I would say that mostly everyone does. And I think everyone in the world actually is a good person. And maybe, I know that's, there might be a lot of cynicism around something like that, but I truly believe that, our culture, there's a lot of confusion, I think, because there's a lot of suffering. And the more we get out of our own personal suffering, the more we can just feel our inherent happiness to be alive, which I think is our birthright, which leads to all these other things we're talking about, caring for other people. Yes, I think it would be kind of some form of denial to say that it doesn't, because those, I think, are very human emotions, and we're so conditioned, especially in Western culture, and Colorado is very much Western culture, to be competitive, to be independent, to, make a name for ourselves, to be recognized. I mean, all these things are viewed as very valuable things, valuable characteristics on a person. So definitely they come up, and they come up in me too. And so one of the things that we try to do as a community, I try to do personally, is when that does come up, when that feeling of, jealousy or coveting something someone else has, whether it's talent or painting they've done, or fame that they have, to kind of turn the tables on that and look inside myself to see, where is that coming from? Where is that feeling coming from? Where am I less that I even need that feeling? And why don't I try instead to be happy for this person? And so I have this practice that I do where if I make a mistake in that way, if I behave in some way that, doesn't represent the way I would like, to be treated and be known for treating other people, I think of something to do that would be a benefit for somebody else, whether I send them a card, congratulating them for whatever it is that they've achieved, or make a phone call, or do something for somebody else that is selfless, to help remind me that this is the path I'm on. It's not about attaining this other thing, which eventually becomes a prison because you're attached to it, and then you can't get liberated. And that's the view really in Buddhism. The more you're attached to, the harder it is to attain liberation, because these things end up, imprisoning you in a certain way. Some of my work is very personal to me. And I have struggled with that. And I think a lot of artists actually do struggle with it on a personal level, because almost every artist I know has some connection to, spirit or whatever their faith is, and it is a conflict of interests, actually. So how to resolve that within ourselves, I think, becomes part of the journey.